All right, welcome into the Week 4 edition of the Rec League podcast. REC, Russ, Eric, Chris. That would be Russ Landy of GM Junior Scouting. He's been all-around professional football for years and years. Some would say a little bit too long, but that's okay. We've also got our friend Chris Martin, former player, current contract advisor, and TV star the world around as well. I'm Eric Edholm with Yahoo Sports, and let's dive into some Week 4 chatter of the NFL. Lots going on, guys. I want to start with a couple of big injuries of note. One to J.J. Watt, one to Dez Bryant. We'll get to Dez in a minute. We'll start with J.J. Watt. The news came out this week. He will be placed on injured reserve. We don't know yet if he'll be gone for the entire season, but certainly looks that way. A couple questions. I'll leave it to you guys. Start with you, Russ. How serious an injury is this, and did he maybe rush back a little bit from his off-season surgery? Or not surgery, but off-season injury.
Well, I mean, I'm sure he wouldn't view it as rushing back. I'm sure he views it as, I didn't feel pain or enough pain to keep me out of the lineup. I wanted to get back in. It's not a coincidence that he re-injured his back. But I have a feeling you're probably seeing, I think, they're going to shut him down, I would expect, for the season. I think to rush him back now would be a big mistake. Let him sit out for the whole year. Let him be 100%. He's not a 23-year-old anymore. He'll be 29 next year. You want to get 2 or 3 more elite years out of him. If you rush him back, it could be catastrophic because back injuries, as we all know, can be the type of thing that linger throughout careers.
Okay, well, I think Chris, what do you think about this?
Big point. Yeah, I think, Russ, the last point was the best point, is that back injury, those things are so tricky. You don't know how long this can linger for. Will he have his full tools available to him to be the same type of player? I wonder about this. I mean, here's a guy that wanted to get back. You know, he has that hard hat mentality. He's the first to tell you that he hadn't missed a game since like his sophomore year in high school. So it's so important to him. And I wonder if he was rushed back and should have been slowed a little bit to get out there. He's a difference maker, obviously, but I think it's the position flexibility that he gives the Texans that they'll be missing. That being said, if there's ever time to kind of be out, Jadeveon Clowney stepping up, Whitney Merciless become a dude. So they have some playmakers. Now they're going to get a chance to go out there and really prove it.
And Watt's production the first couple weeks has been minimal, and we saw him really struggle in that Patriots game in Week 3. So it's going to be fascinating to see. And like you said, he's one of those guys. He had a consecutive game streak. He wanted to get back, play for pride. Now it appears that decision has been kind of taken out of his hands. We mentioned Dez Bryant. And for this, I mean, look, it almost sounds like the story is less about the injury, which is a hairline fracture in his left knee, and more about how he handled it and how the team handled it afterwards. Chris, I'll come back to you right away. They said they wanted to get an MRI on Monday on Dez's knee. He skipped the MRI. Then he skipped the team meeting on Tuesday. Jason Garrett kind of wouldn't talk about it Wednesday. Then finally on Thursday said Dez was afraid of hearing the results of the injury, which is kind of a weird deal and maybe a little bit of an immature decision there. What did you make when you heard all this about Bryant and how the Cowboys handled it?
Well, my immediate thought was, here goes another injury to a guy that you parked a Brinks truck full of money in his driveway. Yep. And you just wonder why you're not getting the production, because if this guy, he came in, he wasn't, he put some balls on the carpet at times. He looked like he was allergic to the football early in the season. So I just think it's a matter of him getting comfortable. Now he sustains an injury, and they need him, guys. I mean, let's face it. This guy's one of the tops in the league. Beyond that point, Terrence Williams is a guy that seems to backtrack at times and regress in the big moments, so you can't really count on him. Cole Beasley is who he is. He steps up and plays a good role, but they need Dez Bryant. They need a healthy Dez Bryant. So, you hold your breath when he's out there because you've seen the litany of injuries that he's had over the season. Hopefully this one won't be a big one, and that they can get him back out there.
And I look at it from two sides. I think on the field, you have Dak Prescott playing good, sound football, not doing anything to make the plays. He needs guys like Dez Bryant, Jason Witten there to throw the ball to on those quick little throws so that he doesn't have to sit in the pocket forever. But the bigger issue to me is, does the way Dez handled this, yes, it's immature, but does it also point to maybe him along with maybe the teammates, maybe the locker room, Is there a lack of respect for Jason Garrett? Is there a lack of respect for the organization that they don't really care? They're going to do things their way, and they're not worried about the rules of the organization. They just are going to do whatever they want. And to me, that's a little bit of a red flag for a team that obviously, with Romo out and with them relying on Prescott, they have to play fundamentally sound football to stay in these close games, and that concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, and then you look at how they handled Greg Hardy last year, making excuses for him. And yet, with lesser players, the guys who didn't wear suits on the road trip, they get admonished. But Hardy, they made excuses for. Dez, they seem to be saying, well, hey, look, this is an immature way to handle it, but we've talked to him about it, no big deal. We find him, That's also my concern a little bit, is the accountability with Jason Garrett and whether stars get treated a little differently down there.
Well, and the challenge that you have is that, when the locker room, that starts to permeate throughout your locker room, then you have some real divide. And I think that's the big issue there is, and Jason Garrett's got to be firm on these issues. I'm a big believer, and obviously you weigh the production. Superstars have earned that right to be called superstars, but it just can't be such a big disparity between the way you treat them and you treat other players, because then once that gets in your locker room, then you have big problems on your hands. So I think they need to get their arms around this thing here, make sure that they're all playing together, because this is a Dallas team, frankly, guys, that I think they're making some noise. I think they're a good team. I know that they have a lot of guys that aren't big names, particularly on that defensive line, but they play as a unit. They're coached up well by Rod Marinelli. And I think this is a team that can make some noise, but they got to keep things glued together.
Let's talk about some of the 3-0 teams as we move on to another topic here. There are 5 of them, and historically, about 80% of those teams that start 3-0 make the playoffs, so it works out pretty well that chances are for the 5, Ravens, Broncos, Vikings, Patriots, and Eagles are going to make the postseason. Chances are one is going to miss it. So I guess I'll just sort of pose it in a broad way. Russ, will come to you first. Of those 5 teams that started 3-0, is there one you're just not believing in? Is there one you for sure think is going to miss the postseason?
Yeah, if I had to pick one of the 5, I'd go with Baltimore. I know it may sound crazy because Flacco's the experienced guy, whereas maybe Carson Wentz and Simeon aren't. But I just look at Baltimore, and to me it looks like they're a team that's just scraping by. They're finding ways to win. And I understand that's the mark of a well-coached team. But I just think that as they get going against better teams later in the season, I don't think they have the firepower to win those games. I don't think Steve Smith, at his age, coming off that injury, is a dynamic guy anymore. I don't see the playmakers on offense that can change games. Don't see a rushing attack. I just think as the year goes on, the better teams are going to separate. I think Baltimore's probably going to finish with 9, maybe 10 wins, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough to get in the playoffs because I don't think they're going to win their division.
You agree with Russ, Chris? Is Baltimore, of those 5 that we mentioned, are they the one that's maybe a little vulnerable?
I think you want to lean to Baltimore. That's certainly, Russ brings up very valid points. But to do that, you got to have a lot of equity and trust in 2 young quarterbacks, in Trevor Siemian and Carson Wentz. And I think statistics will probably work against you in that case to say that these guys can continue to play at such a high level.
No doubt.
They've been masterful. There's no doubt about it. But at some point, the tape's going to be out there. You're going to figure out more ways to defend them, figure out ways that work against their strengths. And I think the good defensive coordinators, savvy ones, will start to tackle that. Now, these guys have played extraordinary football. Can they maintain it? Can they sustain that? I think that's a big question. So I'm going to lean to maybe a team like the Eagles sort of regressing and not making it.
Well, one thing those 5 teams have in common, guys, all 5 playing great defense right now. That's one thing that does stand out. And Russ, what do you think about the Vikings? Some people starting to say maybe they are the 2015 Broncos. They're that kind of team where, okay, you don't have super explosive playmakers on offense. You get a couple big plays here and there. You play good field position. You win with your defense. Can that formula work for the Vikings this year?
I think it can. I think Stephon Diggs is a really good receiver. He may be one of the top 2 or 3 slot receivers in the NFL. I think Kyle Rudolph is a very good tight end. Not an elite guy, but he's a good football player. They have a strong offensive line. I think it's getting better each week. And I really think that Bradford, if he's upright, his arm strength, ability to throw deep, I think that makes their offense a big play offense. I really believe this is the team that I think has a chance to go to the Super Bowl. I think that defense is unrelenting. And if they can combine Jerick McKinnon and Matt Asiata, who I think will end up being the feature back down the stretch, if they can combine to just be average running the ball, I think it's going to be a hard offense to stop the second half of the season.
Yeah, right. And underlying defense, I mean, he said it. Listen, if you don't think that this is the best defense in the NFL, you got to say they're playing the best football. I mean, they have some guys that play lights out. And you start up front, Everson Griffin, Danielle Hunter. These guys are superstars, but they do it at every level. So they can get to the quarterback. They're good on the back end with Harrison Smith. He's a stud back there. And then their linebackers can run and chase and play. So you have to say that the Vikings will have a chance in every game that they play in because of that defense. And, yeah, then it becomes a matter of if the offense with Sam Bradford, if they can continue to do their thing. But defensively, God, Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman, give him his props, the architect putting all these players on the field. They've done an unbelievable job with this team.
And they will at some point get back Sharif Floyd. They just got Xavier Rhodes back too. So that's going to be fun when they're fully healthy on that side of the ball. Now, 4 teams as we kind of move on here to the 0-3 squads. There's a lot going on in Jacksonville. There's a lot going on in New Orleans. Here in Chicago, all 3 of us are located here. Bears, Browns, Saints, and Jaguars all 0-3. 2-part question here. I'll start with you, Russ. Do we anticipate any early season head coaching firings? I already heard maybe Gus Bradley, if he doesn't come back from London with a win, could be the 3rd year in a row we see a coach fired after the London game. Anyone else? Hugh Jackson you'd think would be safe, but boy, what do you think? I mean, Sean Payton, John Fox, a couple experienced guys. So very interesting to look at those 0-3 teams right now.
You know, I do think there's a good chance that by next season we'll see a new coach in New Orleans potentially, and I think also in Jacksonville. But I'd be very surprised if there are any changes during the season. I think Shad Khan, the owner of the Jaguars, brilliant businessman, has shown that he is patient, and he also, I think, understands the fact that making a change mid-season is not going to help the team this season. Yep. So what good does it do? Give these guys a chance. In terms of New Orleans, I just look at that and think Tom Benson, he is a very loyal guy to Coach Payton. I don't think he's going to go down the road of firing him mid-season, but I will say if they go down this road and they finish 4-12, how many years does Sean get after doing so well earlier to the point where I think at this point he may say, you know, Sean, maybe it's getting a little stale in the locker room. Maybe it's time to bring in a fresh face. But those 2 places, to me, are the biggest concern. If John Fox were not owed the money he is on the rest of his contract, I would think maybe the Bears at the end of the season. But I think he's going to get 1 more year at least to try to turn this thing around. And I doubt Hugh Jackson's going anywhere.
Yeah. Chris, Bears, what's going on, man?
Boy, I wish I had the answers. Being a former Bear, you know, it's kind of hard to watch. It really is. You think they bring in John Fox to have a calming effect and Ryan Pace, the guy that frankly said that they need better football players, and you don't see a good product out there right now. Now, granted, they've had some injuries, obviously, but everyone has those, so that can't be an excuse. I just don't see a team right now that's talented enough, top to bottom, to really compete. And you know, you wonder if Jay Cutler's last days are in Chicago. This is his final season. I would have to think the way things are going now, just from an economic standpoint, that would be the case. But as Russ alluded to, too, and I think you mentioned it, E. I mean, Gus Bradley, you know, they had a steadfast vision of what they were going to expect out of this team. They spent a lot of cash, including the Malik Jackson, bringing him over from Denver and giving him a boatload of money. So the ink's getting real red down there, guys, and I think when that happens, that shortens the span for any coach and or GM and David Caldwell. So those guys are on a slippery slope. I think the one thing we know about Cleveland, Hugh Jackson can coach his butt off. I mean, because he's getting those guys to go out there and compete and believe in themselves when, in essence, you look at a roster that's very devoid of talent. So I think there'll be some fingers pointed at DePodesta that's there, probably Sashi Brown as well. But that being said, I don't think those guys are going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think Cleveland, at least you can see sort of the vision. You know, they don't have the pieces right now. But the Jaguars, you know, there's already talk about, you know, is Miles Jack being screwed up by playing 2 positions and moving around and that sort of thing. So Very interested to see, especially them playing the Indianapolis Colts in London this weekend. We kind of touched on it earlier, and we'll move on to a different topic here. Sort of when we discussed some of those 3-0 teams, it's been really impressive to see the quote-unquote inexperienced quarterbacks having success. So it's been one of the big stories this season. You have Carson Wentz 3-0 in Philly playing lights out. He's a folk hero already. Dak Prescott, we mentioned briefly, obviously filling in for Tony Romo. Trevor Siemian, I mean, boy, I think everybody kind of questioned John Elway's vision of replacing Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler. Can't argue with the results. They've got Paxton Lynch waiting in the wings. And you got to throw in the New England Patriots, too. Jimmy Garoppolo, we didn't know when or if he'd have to step in. He did a great job the first game and a half. Jacoby Brissett did a nice job in relief of him. So really, that's been one of the themes of the season. Russ, I mean, from a scouting perspective, which one of these guys has impressed you the most? And maybe who is sort of fool's gold, if there is one in that group?
Well, I think the interesting thing here, I mean, I look at Trevor Siemian and Garoppolo and say, you know what, when I watch them, each game, given Garoppolo's 2 games, they allowed him to do more. And I think that's partly because they've been there for more than a year. They have probably a better grasp of everything that's going on within the offense. So you've seen them do a little more. Been very impressed with Simeon's progression. This kid looks like by the end of the year, he may have the Broncos in a tight spot where they say, you know what, we're going to roll with Siemian again next year, and Lynch may become trade bait a year down the road because you never get rid of a quarterback who's playing well. Of the other guys, Prescott, Wentz, and Brissett, very different. I think Wentz has made mostly conservative plays, but he's made a few plays to carry the team. Prescott also been very conservative, but I have been impressed with his poise. For a young kid, he has not panicked, especially because he wasn't asked to do a lot of these things in college. I've been real impressed with both he and Wentz. Brissett, I mean, they tailored so much of what they did for the Patriots for that game to his athleticism, to getting the ball out fast. You didn't really get a chance to see him do a lot of things. I'd love to see him start another game or two. Obviously, the most he's going to get is a game. He's an intriguing kid, but the most single impressive guy to me so far has been Wentz, just because to go from North Dakota State all the way to the NFL, and it looks like it's not even a challenge. Now, given they're really tailoring it to him and not making him do a lot of complex things, but still, he hasn't been changed by the speed, which, Chris, of the 3 of us having played in the league, you can tell us the speed is the biggest change for most of these guys coming to the NFL.
Yeah, the speed in the vernacular, the words that they use to call the plays. Now, granted, he came from a pro-style offense, so he does have an advantage in that regard. But yeah, he's seeing things and processing them very quickly on the field. And what I like is that he's putting the ball in places where only his receivers can make a play on it. Much like Dak Prescott. I mean, Give this young man some credit too. Like, he's been spinning the ball and putting it in tight quarters. He has that air of confidence. And from what I'm told, down in Dallas right now, fellas, there is a zeal, there is a buzz that they believe they can win every game behind this young man. And it sort of points back to his interviews at the Combine when I talked to a bunch of scouts that said, look, he was the most impressive interview of the quarterbacks because you felt like he had that dog in him. He was going to go out and win. It's just in his DNA. And it's nice to see it all unfold. And then, I think we got to go back, guys, and at least mention all these passing camps that these guys are going to in high school, 7-on-7. I mean, they're coming into the league just more advanced and more of a refined product. So it's great to see these young guys playing so well. I know scouts are going to have a lot of pressure on them now to really make sure they're evaluating these quarterbacks, make sure they're not overlooking a guy like Trevor Siemian, who's a 7th-round pick, who 98% of people thought he was not a draftable guy. So it makes you have to, measure it twice, cut once. But it's good for the league, and it's good for these guys. They're playing great football.
And back to Wentz real quick. I mean, you mentioned North Dakota State. We obviously know he's a really mature kid, but he's also got a great situation in Philadelphia in that both his head coach, Doug Peterson, Frank Reich, his offensive coordinator, and also John DeFilippo, who is his quarterback's coach, all 3 played the position. 2 of the 3 played at the highest level, at the NFL level. Both guys, Frank Reich, back up to Jim Kelly for a long time. Doug Peterson, played for Andy Reid and other people. They were in the league a long time because of their intelligence, too. So I think there's a great little insulation there. Plus, Jim Schwartz's defense is doing a fantastic job as well.
And I think the one thing you want to mention there is, I know I've always been told for years that quarterback is the worst coach position in the NFL because so many of the guys that are coaching the quarterbacks all they're looking at is scheming because they're ready to be an offensive coordinator, and offensive coordinators are all looking to be head coaches. Well, here you have 3 guys who played quarterback, and I think they can all relate to the fact that the quarterback needs that individual attention. And I think that's something Wentz is getting, and it's a very uncommon situation to have so many guys who have played the position there to advise and to help and to really build a culture around him so that he can succeed. So you got to give credit to Philadelphia and also give credit to Howie Roseman. A lot of people like to bash Howie out there, but I mean, he brought in Peterson, and I'm sure he was heavily involved with the decision to bring in Frank Reich. So give them credit for the way they've set up the coaching staff and the way they've prepared Wentz in terms of surrounding him with the right people.
And Dylan Bradford. I mean, now it looks like a chess move. I mean, he's got to get some more points back, Howie Roseman, that is, on his side, because, I mean, this looks masterful now. And I think the other thing it does, guys, is it puts a lot of pressure on people because no longer are days where we can say, oh, well, you took this quarterback early. We have time to develop him. No, microwave society again. We want it now. We've shown that there are guys that can go out there and win now, even 4th rounders, even 7th rounders at the QB position. So you do not have time on your side. Why are we spending $70 million to bring these guys in when we can go get guys that are a lot cheaper, a lot less, and they're having greater results? So believe me, a lot of people in the front office are taking note of what these guys are doing.
Jared Goff obviously comes up every time, too, because he hasn't gotten that chance yet. He didn't look good in the preseason. There's all these things kind of working against him right now. So fair or not, the pressure on him is super high just because these guys are playing well. And, I mean, you know, I'll be curious to see when the Rams kind of fold him in, too, and whether he'll be ready at that time.
Yeah, I gotta figure the Rams. I mean, obviously they know better than any of us whether he's ready or not because they're in the building with him. But when you look at the guys they have, they don't have those three former quarterbacks coaching, and I think that's one of the things that's going to hinder him in terms of it's going to take him longer. And I'm not saying they're not good coaches, but they may not be able to direct him as quickly towards the things that get him ready to be on the field. I think the Rams would be best suited, play Keenum all year, let Goff adjust, and next offseason hope that Goff takes the bull by the horns, becomes that leader in the offseason, and next year he becomes their starting quarterback from day one.
And he is 21 years old, so they do have a little bit of time compared to Wentz, who turns 24 in December. All right, well, this segues perfectly into our next topic, our final topic prior to week 4 here. We always try to mix in a little draft or college talk, maybe combine the two a little bit. Incredible game Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. That would be Clemson, number 5, and number 3, Louisville. And it starts with the 2 quarterbacks. Obviously, coming into the year, Deshaun Watson, everybody knew his name. We saw him in the national title game. Terrific college talent. But I think Lamar Jackson, people didn't really know him as readily coming into this year. Some people did have him on that breakout list. They would be very right. He has been spectacular for the most part. So we've got Jackson, we've got Watson, we've got 2 top 5 teams meeting in Death Valley. Chris, I mean, what do you think about this game? Just taking a step back and also looking at the 2 quarterbacks.
Well, let's start with Lamar Jackson. Here's another kid that comes out of the South Florida area. You wonder why Florida schools cannot nab a guy like that. We saw it with Teddy Bridgewater when he came out of Miami Northwestern High School. So another one gets out of the state of Florida. This is a kid that puts a lot of stress on defenses because he's good enough to get back. He can throw the ball. He's playing with a great deal of confidence. And obviously he's not afraid to take it and go with it. So you got to kind of build a fence around him. You got to keep him inside the pocket because when he gets out on the perimeter, he can be very dangerous. Clemson, conversely, obviously it's time for Deshaun Watson to really step up. I think he will embrace this moment. People are probably saying, hey, Louisville is going to make a lot of noise, but I would expect Clemson, who's been shaky so far this season, to come out and play well. They know what's at stake here. This is a great opportunity for them. They have some difference makers, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So I expect this to be a real shootout, E.
Yeah, and obviously Jackson, we're not going to mention his name from a draft perspective until next year. He is only a sophomore. Watson, I wonder, I mean, he started a little bit slowly last year, really cranked it up the second half of the season. We saw him in the playoffs. He was magnificent. Everybody had him as the unquestioned number 1 pick and all that stuff, or at least the top quarterback. I wonder, has that doubt crept in at all? Some people have mentioned DeShone Kizer. I know we kind of talked about them a little last week, Russ. Has that pressure affected Watson's play that you can tell, or is this just sort of the guy that takes a little while to get going before he hits his stride?
Well, I think a lot of it, and it's with both of these guys truly, but Watson's the guy here that we're talking about, is both of these guys are special athletes. They're bright kids. They have big arms. But I know that when I spoke to scouts this offseason, the biggest concern they had about Watson was he's not a very accurate thrower.
Yeah.
And that's something that, often takes a while to get going during the season. So if you're not accurate to start with, you're going to be even less accurate at the beginning of the season because you're working new guys into your offense, new offensive linemen, a few new guys in there, so everything's new. But overall, he is more of a guy that makes plays when the play breaks down and can rely on his talent, athletic ability, rather than being a traditional just drop back and the ball's out. I know a lot of scouts really like him as a kid. They love his intangibles. They love his big arm. They want to see more consistency accuracy-wise, and that's my concern with both him and with Jackson. I don't see the footwork to accompany that talent to make them accurate this year. I think you're going to see a lot of inconsistencies from both of them in this game because both of these teams are good teams. I think you're going to see a high-scoring game, but you're going to see some inaccuracy.
Yeah, and one game obviously never defines a prospect, but when you have as many NFL people descending on this game as there will be, we know that press box will be filled with NFL scouts. You see them in person, those games maybe tend to resonate a little bit more, so we'll be interested to see what both guys do in this one. The other big college story, probably the biggest college story maybe of the season so far, Les Miles fired down at LSU. I'm actually going to be at that game against Missouri this weekend down in Death Valley, and it's such a weird feeling down there from everything I've read. I mean, Ed Orgeron takes over kind of like he did back in 2012 at USC. Obviously a different situation, less one of those guys. I mean, he's obviously a beloved figure in some circles. A lot of LSU fans, though, had moved on. And then you've got the Leonard Fournette factor. Ed Orgeron kind of talking that maybe they're going to open things up a little, maybe throw the ball a little bit more. Fournette's been banged up. He's got the ankle. He's got the knee. I mean, I wrote about it this week. What do you guys think about the whole situation down there? And should Fournette maybe consider sitting out to help kind of protect his draft stock a little bit?
Well, I mean, hindsight's always 20/20 now. I think you bring up a very valid point. This thing's just been so mishandled. I mean, it's almost comical the way they've done it. I mean, Les Miles, if you wanted him out before, you should have gone ahead and made that move and stood by it. When you vacillate and you don't do things the right way, then you end up coming back. And now what you do is you really make those kids in that locker room suffer because you're making a transition like this mid-phase, which I don't think is ever any good. So Ed Orgeron, I mean, he went in there and he sort of embraced the role as if, he's going to be the guy there for the next 30 years. He handled it. So some would say seeming somewhat nonsensical, but at least he's been there before. He's done it. They're going to try to stem the tide. To your point about Leonard Fournette, it would seem to me that there's some money with wings now that's leaving his pockets just because he hasn't played well. He's banged up with injuries. The team, by and large, seems to be headed southward. So I think that would hurt. I mean, you don't want to see a guy sit out and just start going to train and do those things because I firmly believe football players get better by playing football. But, yeah, you look at it and you wonder, did this kid cost himself some money?
Russ, what do you think?
To me, I think you make a great point, though, about Miles. Why didn't they do this before the season? Because here's what I envision happening. Orgeron is a great motivator. His team, if you talk to people at USC, the players love this guy. What's going to happen here is LSU's probably going to lose one more game this year. Those players are going to rally like crazy. They're going to play their hearts out for Orgeron. And there's LSU, who can literally have their choice of pretty much any coach in the country except maybe Nick Saban. And they're going to be sort of backed into a corner of, do we keep Orgeron? Because he won almost every game, and maybe all of them, after we fired Les. I think this is a real bad decision by LSU because it puts them in a spot where they're going to have to basically thumb their nose at the team. If Orgeron is able to motivate and they win out or almost win out, they're going to have to tell all the players, we don't care what you think. We don't care that you like this guy. We're blowing him out too, and we're bringing in a new coach. I think it's going to really hurt. You're going to see players leave. If they win out and get rid of Orgeron, you're going to see a lot of players defect. You're going to see a bad recruiting class.
But those players may leave already because of the Les Miles, the way that's been handled too. I think Orgeron, I mean, he's a placeholder. And I think, I mean, let's not get it twisted. I think they probably told him, look, under no circumstances are you going to be the guy that we end up going with. I mean, there's a guy that you take Highway 10 going west, I think you get the University of Houston, something like that.
Yep.
I mean, there's going to be a guy there that I'm sure they would love to get in the building. So if you look at it, guys, we saw Orgeron do this at USC. You know, he still got pushed out there. So I think they're just trying to weather this thing, but you hate to see it for the kids. Now, he's from LSU, so I'll give you that. He's going to have some fervor behind him, but he's got to stem the tide down there.
And Russ, I'm glad, you say they may only lose one more game. I'm glad knowing going into this weekend that when Mizzou does beat them, that win will be that much bigger in hindsight. So that's good. I have a little incentive.
Pregame flip, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. We win the toss, we're all good, right? I get some jambalaya, I'm a happy man. I will say this, though. I have no faith whatsoever in athletic director Joe Oliva. This is the guy who screwed up last year. The guy who screwed up Skip Bertman, the baseball coach, and that whole situation, him outgoing. He screwed up the Duke lacrosse situation. I mean, everywhere he's gone, it seems like there's been kind of a stink left behind. So I'm going to get off my soapbox on that one. But how they handle Fournette, how they handle Orgeron, and how they handle the coaching search, whether it's Tom Herman, whether it's somebody at Brett Bielema, whoever it may be, is going to be very interesting indeed. All right, this has been the second edition of the Rec League. Russ, Eric, and Chris bringing it to you on both the NFL and college football. Subscribe to this page right here. You'll get notices about future shows every week, either on Tuesday or Wednesday. We will do that chat for you. It's been a good chat with you guys this week. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey, bring me back a po' boy, little crawfish, shrimp po' boy.
I hear
down there.
I hear it keeps well in my suitcase, so I'll just do that. Right.
See you.
All right, fellas, take it easy.
See you guys.